Shanghai. Once again in its long history of struggle, the fourth largest city in the world lay under siege. Hundreds sweated to dig trenches and build earthworks. Behind their defenses, the nationalists were preparing their stand before the city. At the barriers, guards searched and probed, trying to weed fifth columnists from a steady stream of refugees. Down from the battle areas flowed an endless tide, the tragic, age-old portent of approaching war. By outward signs, Shanghai looked the same as ever. The same prosperous, swarming anthill. The same crowded mixture of east and west, poverty and wealth. But beneath this exterior were the cracks of economic strain. In the banks, paper money piled before the cashiers. As nationalist China waned, so did the value of its currency. For Shanghai, money had become mere paper. As thousands squeezed into the city, so thousands fled. Fled by the only escape route left open. Ship passages were at a premium. At the quayside lay the British cruiser London, bearing the marks of a Yangtze battle with the communist artillery. To Shanghai's hospitals went the British wounded, victims of somebody else's war. Then the war traffic began to turn. Inward instead of outward came loads of weary troops. For the defeated, demoralized nationalists, the end was near. Then, certain of the issue, Shanghai grew calm. For the office worker, the rickshaw boy, the barber, for timeless China, this was but the death of one dynasty, the birth of another. To New York, gateway to Washington and Lake Success, each arriving ship and plane brought its fresh quota of political pilgrims. Diplomats from Britain and Western Europe, from Russia and her allied states. Men of different nationalities, men of conflicting creeds. But for New Yorkers, this clash of creeds was no new import. In a Manhattan courthouse, a prolonged trial moved into yet another session. Here, a group of communists had stood investigation for 20 weeks on charge for conspiracy against the federal government. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, sympathizers demonstrated their disapproval. But at the Waldorf and Madison Square Garden, picketers were of a different political tinge. For inside sat delegates to the Cultural and Scientific Conference for World Peace, a body leaning more towards the policies of Russia than to those of the USA. In New York, the rift of creeds was clearly marked. Meanwhile, in Washington, a significant step. In the departmental auditorium, foreign ministers of 12 nations put their signatures to a new international document. Known as the Atlantic Pact, this agreement covered 14 points of mutual assistance. Over the ocean from which it drew its name, the pact threw a defense network affecting 330 million people. In his address, President Truman said,
"It is a simple document, but if it had have existed in 1914 and in 1939, supported by the nations who are represented here today, I believe it would have prevented the acts of aggression which led to 2 world wars."
In Europe's communist circles, the signing of the Atlantic Pact aroused bitter resentment. Claiming representation for 69 countries, 500 million people, leaders asserted that the pact was a military alliance designed for the waging of aggressive war. In rallies from Prague to Paris, demonstrators marched in opposition. In Italy, herself a signatory of the pact, feelings ran to open riot. At the Third General Assembly of the United Nations, the Atlantic Pact underwent cross-examination. In a spirited defense, Britain's Hector MacNeil said,
"For anyone to claim that a pact to which Great Britain and the democratic peoples are partners could be aggressive in design is to display not only a complete ignorance of modern history, but a bewildering ignorance as to the structure and complexion of representative democratic government." Let me, with great presumption, offer a touchstone upon this question. The closer a government are to their people, the more difficult does it become for such a government to declare war. Modern democratic peoples will not declare war except when their own territories are invaded or when some such democratic characteristic as liberty, justice, toleration is violently and grossly abused.